All right, let's move on to the defense. I guess we'll start up front. Kobe Jones, defensive end, coming back. Jaden Crumady as well, kind of spearhead the efforts there, set us up along the defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, Mississippi State, a team that's been known for really good defensive linemen in the past. You look at the NFL, some of the top defensive linemen, the like of Fletcher Cox and Chris Jones, Mississippi State products. And this was a defense last season that really surprised people. Finishing the top half in the SEC, I think 4th or 5th in total defense, was a defense that had a lot of inexperience, and not many people were expecting to finish in that top half of the league. Defensive coordinator Zach Arnett was someone who was mentioned, I think, in just about every single major school who was looking for a defensive coordinator, the likes of Texas, at Notre Dame, and Oregon. He was mentioned for all those jobs, but he's coming back to Starkville for year 2. So it's going to be exciting to see what this defense can do. Defensive tackle Jaden Crumady is someone who he got 31 tackles in 2020, but he's someone who could really make a big step forward in terms of what he can do in 2021. Looking at defensive end, Aaron Odom is someone who, as I mentioned, with a guy like Tulu Griffin on the offensive side of the ball, he didn't get a lot of production in 2020, only 17 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, but he was someone who played a pretty key role towards the end of the season. A lot of Mississippi State's players opted out in the middle of the season, especially on the defensive side of the ball. The defense was riddled with opt-outs. Still then, the defensive unit was able to stick together and have a really good season. And young guys like Aaron Odom and Jaden Crumady are 2 guys who sort of led that charge. There's a number of veterans who are departing, the likes of Marquise Spencer and Errol Thompson and Kobe Jones. The likes of them are all seniors and have graduated, but Aaron Odom and Jaden Crumady. And I'll mention one more player who opted out in the middle of the season. That's Nathan Pickering. Since he opted out, he doesn't have much of any production. Who will be coming back this coming season in 2021, who could really spearhead what I think could be a really solid defensive line.
Pickering 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. A lot of guys coming back along the defensive front. Linebacker pretty similar. It sounds like that's the theme of the team, is that fortunately a lot of personnel coming back across the board. And so Errol Thompson's gone, but the rest of the linebacking core fairly intact.
Yeah, I would say that. And Errol Thompson was a senior leader. I would say arguably the best defensive player in the team. And he was someone that Mississippi State, it would have been a stretch if he would have decided to come for a 5th year. But he decided to go on to the NFL, which is no surprise. But a couple players on the linebacking position who will be coming back, led by Aaron Brule. Aaron Brule was someone who took a major step forward this past season. 71 tackles, which is second on the team, had 8.5 tackles for loss in 2020. Really wreaked havoc at the linebacker position, had a really good season. Another one, not the production isn't quite as much as Brule, but he was a very important player for Mississippi State's defense last year, was Tyrus Wheat. He had 30 tackles and had a pick in 2020. Those 2 players at the linebacking position and a host of others, but those 2 in particular are coming back. And linebacker is a very important position in the 3-3-5 that Zach Arnett likes to run on the defensive side. So it's a pretty linebacker friendly defense, and I think that Brule and Wheat can really lead that charge.
Yeah, Brule and Wheat also with a lot of disruptive plays. Brule 8 tackles for loss and 4 sacks, and Wheat had 6 and 5 sacks from the linebacking core. So now we move on to the secondary, and these guys get a lot of practice time defending the pass in practice against the Mike Leach offense, and then they take it to the field in the SEC and get to face arguably the best quarterbacks and wide receivers in the nation. So set us up along the defensive secondary.
Sure. Starting at cornerback, Mississippi State has a covey of young talent at cornerback, led by Emmanuel Forbes. It's another, I told you, it's a continuing theme. True freshman last year. As a true freshman, 44 tackles, 5 interceptions, and 3 pick-6s for Emmanuel Forbes last season. I believe those 3 pick-6s led the country.
I would think so.
Yeah, as a true freshman, obviously you would imagine with those numbers, he was a member of freshman All SEC team and was a freshman All American by just about every single publication you can find. And then another player at the quarterback position is Martin Emerson. He was a team leader with 72 tackles, or a team leader, one of the leading tacklers of the team. He's a very important piece at the quarterback position. And then looking at safety, there are three players who are coming back who are very important. One of which was a player that not many Mississippi State fans and even media members were that familiar with, and I'll start with him. That's London Kraft. He was a player who started throughout the entire season. I remember when they released the Week 1 depth chart against LSU, people saw London Kraft and literally went, "Who is that?" He ended up having a really good season, had 57 tackles in 2020. Another player who had really good production was Sean Preston. He had 65 tackles, and another safety is Colin Duncan. He had 46 tackles and 2 picks in 2020. So those are all guys who are all coming back. Very important pieces for Mississippi State. It was a very, it was a secondary that showed, it was the secondary of Mississippi State's weakness at times last year, but still, for the most part, for being such a young unit, they really played over their heads, I would say. And since there are 2 very important corners and 3 very important safeties coming back, that's a secondary that could be very impressive in 2021.
John Lewis is out of Germantown. He's a 4-star, an outside linebacker. He's not on campus yet. He's coming in the summer. And then I see Deshaun Page is an inside linebacker out of the JUCO routes. As you look at the class, any guys in particular that are expected to possibly vie for a position or some playing time?
Well, I mean, you mentioned John Lewis, and the thing about him is he's one of the most highly touted players in the class. But because Mississippi State is so loaded at linebacker, he might not get that kind of immediate playing time. But if you want guys who will potentially step in immediately, you would probably have to go to the offensive side of the ball. And there are 2 guys that we mentioned already, Theodore, Knox, and Antonio Harmon. As everyone can imagine, Mike Leach's offense is one to where there cannot be enough wide receivers. You want as many wide receivers as humanly possible. Mike Leach has said that they try, I think he once had a quote talking about how most coaches view balanced offense as 50% pass, 50% run, and I think his comment was, "I believe that's 50% stupid." His idea of a balanced offense is giving the ball to as many people as possible. So even though Mississippi State has a pretty stacked receiving core in terms of depth coming in, guys like Harmon and Knox, despite being true freshmen, I mean, I mentioned tons of true freshmen already. Going from last season, guys like Harmon and Knox can make an immediate impact on the offensive side of the ball. So if you're looking for 2 impact players in this 2021 class, I would point at those 2 guys.
It's kind of ironic, Daniel, that we've got you on today because I just saw Mike Leach retweeted today, in fact, on Twitter. It had nothing to do with football, and we'll leave it right there.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Oh, my goodness. He's done a little reading, I guess, during the off season.
Not only reading, maybe some reading that rhymes, I would say.
Absolutely. All right. Brandon Ruiz made 10 of 12 kicks, so is he back?
He is back. There was some speculation about whether or not he would return, but he is back. His 83.3% kicking percentage, I guess, field goal percentage, excuse me, is the best in Mississippi State history. So it's pretty good for him to be coming back. There was another field goal kicker who got some playing time last year who had been Mississippi State starter from 2017 through 2019 named Jace Chrisman, who was, interestingly enough, knowing that both of these guys were on the roster, Brandon Ruiz, the most accurate kicker in state history, Jace Chrisman, the second most accurate kicker in Mississippi State history, but he's transferring to Florida. But fortunately for Mississippi State, Brandon Ruiz is returning, and he has been, I mean, I know that one of those missed kicks was sort of a long shot, about a 54, 55-yarder that he was sort of thrown out there to kick maybe before halftime. I don't remember the exact situation. But really, I mean, he's as accurate of a kicker as you can get in college football. So that's big for Mississippi State that Ruiz is coming back.